So I plan to review Spirit as my next video, but then I broke down and watched this masterpiece. This anime has me at a loss of words. Usually I have an easy time putting into writing what I'm feeling for each show, but this one was different. I don't know how to explain it, but everyone should go watch it, regardless of what you think of the art direction or not. Obviously, animating this show as anthropomorphic animals is one of the most notable things about it. It's a jump of faith, and I think it paid off. It attracted an audience despite the anime community being a little bit up in arms about the aforementioned art style. By far, this is the best anime I've ever watched, and further, even the best show. It hits everything I've ever wanted from an anime, and continues to blow me away the more and more I research it. Let me show you what I mean with my first point. Beastars was slightly predictable in terms of the romance storyline. If you've watched several romance anime, you've probably already seen it. But what they did remarkably well was separate Legoshi and Haru. Usually in anime, the only thing keeping the love interests apart is their feelings. Of course, that's still there in Beastars, but they now not only have to overcome their feelings for each other, they also have to overcome a judging society, their friends, bullies, exes, criminal organizations, hell, even their own biology. All this works to distance Legoshi from Haru in order to create a feeling of hopelessness, a feeling that no matter what they do, they won't be able to be together. It also slows down the plot to where typically if a pair were to drag on their feelings for a season, you'd start seeing them as dense. But all Legoshi and Haru want to do is be together, so they do the only thing they can, try. But that lingering fear of hopelessness is always there. The creator of the show even went as far as to outright stating that he wanted to give Haru an easy-to-say name to distance herself from Legoshi, which is quite a mouthful. And then desire. Desire has been an underlying theme of the show, one that's a little less obvious than the carnivore-herbivore separation, which is another satire on class and race within modern-day Japan, as well as in America. But desire is a different story, a little more on the nose. It's not something that we directly control. It's what we want, it's what we need. Legoshi's a perfect example of this. His biology tells him, and literally mocks him, to eat a particular rabbit. But he has to overcome these feelings because there's only one thing he desires more than to eat Haru, and that's to love her. The animation in Beastars is fantastic, especially for an anime. Using 3D animation allowed animators to take more time on expressions and acting without having to draw out each and every frame. It adds quite an extra amount of emotion to each character. Take a look at Legoshi. You can see him constantly changing his face and reacting to the situation rather than a pose basis of a more traditionally animated 2D show. Not to say that Beastars doesn't use 2D animation at all. It uses 2D for backgrounds and for characters that aren't essential to the story, because it would have taken longer to fully model, animate, and render than to just draw frame by frame. Take a look at a scene with both 2D and 3D animated characters. Look how the 3D characters have more expression. They sway and have small fidgets that show more of their personality than a solid frame-by-frame animation of other characters in the scene. After all, it isn't skill or techniques that make shows bad, it's time. And although they could have ran the anime in smooth 24 frames per second, they instead decided to run it on 2s, which is when in 24 frames per second, there are 2 of the same frames repeated. It adds a more choppy look to the animation, but it's what nearly all other anime has been animated in. And Beastars decided to run on 2s purely to imitate the feeling of traditionally animated anime. And that's what made it feel at home with other 2D anime, while adding quite a bit of extra detail that you couldn't do in 2D due to time restrictions. Beastars uses a variety of cinematic techniques that are quite unique for anime. For instance, this scene in the first episode uses an odd technique of revealing two characters at once, which wouldn't normally appear in a typical shot, reverse shot type of cinematography. Anyway, the camera is facing Kai and away from Legoshi, but the animators intentionally place a mirror behind them to reveal only Legoshi's face. At that point, he bares his teeth to avoid a fight. The plot relied on the audience knowing this aspect, so they reinforce it in two ways. One through the reaction of Kai, and one through the face of Legoshi in the mirror. The next technique they use isn't quite as creative, but it's still unique. It's a split screen. Though it might be a little bit jarring at first, the split screen is used to reveal again two characters and the reactions at the same time. Beastars almost feels like it was specifically created with emotion in mind. After all, Beastars is a love story, and love is arguably the strongest emotion. But there's not just love, there's sadness, hopelessness. As I said before, there's a lingering fear. That takes the pure euphoria of love away and leaves it with just melancholy. And if I were to explain the feeling of Beastars in one word, that would be it. Everything feels that way. The story, the music, the acting. It reflects how Legoshi and Haru are trying to be together against what may be best for them. Chikohiro Kobayashi and Ayaka Sembongi did a fantastic job putting their full efforts into each of their lines, offering a huge range of emotions, from sad to happy to angry. Each performance felt like it was genuinely their best efforts. And as for the English dub, well, so Beastars has kind of changed my mind on the music of anime. The preconceived notion when I go into an anime, and I'm sure a lot of you do too, is that the only recognizable music is the opening or the ending, not the music in between. And that's kind of odd because typically, in American mediums of film, you'd find lots of examples of leitmotifs and themes representing things. That might just be because leitmotifs are a more traditionally Western thing, especially considering it originated from Wagner, but that doesn't mean these extremely powerful uses of music shouldn't be included. At least that's what I thought. Apparently Satoru Kosaki thought so too, because his soundtrack blew me away, and now sits my favorite anime soundtrack to date. Sorry Miyazaki superfans. Anyway, the music in Beastars is almost a masterclass in leitmotifs. Like for instance, not only do most characters get a theme related to them, but they also get an instrument or a section. Let me show you. The first song on the Beastars original soundtrack is called Beastars fittingly. It sets up multiple leitmotifs to be expressed later. First is this walking 6-chord accompaniment and a melody expressed in brass. The piano introduces the bass line dancing up and down the scale, never really landing on a tonic. Then these offset 6th chords. These added 6th and upper extensions take the edge off a chord by adding a small amount of dissonance in between the major thirds, usually and add a 7th. But the 7th is a very strong dominant chord, meaning it wants to resolve. But Kosaki wanted a piece that was more flowy rather than the almost classical sounding 5-1 cadence. And 6 chords don't really have a particular pull towards resolving to a major or minor. That helps to add tonal ambiguity to an otherwise jazzy major piece, especially with the accordion melody adding chromatic embellishments to a theme that walks up and down in semitone intervals. And then later this melody is expressed in horns, with a bass line walking down the scale till it lands on a G, and then jumps up to a C to begin walking back up again. All of these themes come together to represent Beastars. Not in the same way as the opening does, but it represents the identity of the show, the plot, the characters. It's a musical summation of all the contents of the show, thus why it feels so subdued and somewhat lonesome and hopeful. And Beastars' theme is heard everywhere in the soundtrack. And now to the characters, and I could go into extra detail about how each character gets a track, a theme, an instrument, like how Harlequin Rabbits literally gets a track called Harlequin Rabbits to represent them, and how each place in the world generally gets a theme to represent it, like Cheriton University for Cheriton University, and Black Market for Black Market, and when each place is mentioned, it either draws instrumentation or a theme from its respective track, but I'll just try to keep it to the main characters. But there's so much melodic content I couldn't cover in this video. Like, I had an entire spreadsheet of all 48 tracks detailing each leitmotif and how they relate. Links in description. Anyway, one of the most easily recognizable themes is Haru's, which is usually expressed in flutes or woodwinds. But what's interesting is that it happens to be a simplified version of the ending theme to Beastars, A Tale of Moon. This is why the theme is played fully in the reprised track of the same name. Take a listen.
俺がそばにいなくちゃとか勝手に近寄ってきて、幻想と違うと分かると食い散らかして去っていく。ずっといろいろなやつの餌であり続ける人生だった。まあ別にどうでもいいんだけどさ。
You can hear this theme everywhere when Haru's on theme. If you need more evidence, here's Haru literally humming her own theme in episode 2.
でも大丈夫よ。きっと悪い夢でも見たのよ。
自分でもおかしいと思う。俺、彼女の言葉に救われても追い詰められてもいない。ただただ目をそらせないでいる。
It repeats this melody of an F jumping up to an A sharp, then walking back down to the F again. That is undeniably Haru's theme. There's this one scene where Legoshi leaves his friends to go back for something, but we the audience don't know what he's going back for. That is, until it plays this.
俺は
すみません。俺寄るところが。お疲れ様でした。
This is the perfect use of leitmotif, and if you didn't notice, that was an excerpt from Haru's theme, and it tells the audience, without words ever being used, that Legoshi's thinking about her.
伸びたな。
Next is Juno. Her theme is characterized by a walking bass line and a violin pizzicato and accordion chords. This is one of the funnest tracks to listen to, and it's definitely an earworm. Take a listen.
しくやれてますか？
やっぱり狼だから怖がられちゃうんですかね。みんなに避けられてる気がして、実は隕石祭なんです。
It's instrumented in brass, which kind of comes to represent carnivores. Anyway, it starts by walking from a G down an octave, outlining a G major chord, which just so happens to be the same chord that another carnivore's theme starts on, Legoshi's Feelings. It even further pulls the parallels between the two wolves' themes closer. It's even written in the same key, so not only is Ruis telling that Legoshi should go after Juno, so is the music. You can hear this theme commonly when she's on screen, and usually one of two tracks play, either Juno is in love or Juno is in love adult. Weird name, but nice track. The only other time I could clearly hear callbacks to Juno's theme is in Wolf and Rabbit, which I'll get to in a sec. Now Ruis. He is different because there's quite a few themes that play when he's around, mainly being Bite Me, Ruis' Feelings, Ruis' Heart Remember, President of the Academy, and Ruis the Beastar. But the common denominator of all these themes is the use of sax, and I don't know if I'm reading too far into this, but the sax is still a brass instrument, and as stated before, brass instruments represent carnivores, but Ruis is an herbivore. The thing is, sax has never really classically fit cleanly into a brass section. It was an outlier, a black sheep. David Bruce has a fantastic video on the subject, link in the description. So, and put your tinfoil hats on, Ruis' theme, being stated in saxes, show how he, being an herbivore, is putting on a mask of a carnivore to seem more in charge or controlling to help him be a Beastar, as is hinted in the last few episodes when Mayor speaks to him. So anyway, the only theme that is consistent between all of these songs is this one, so I'm just going to take a leap and call this Ruis' theme. It's this melody, of course, in sax, going down an F minor scale with an added F sharp embellishment. Take a listen. So anyway, the only theme that stays consistent between all of these songs is this one. So I'm just going to take a leap and call this one Ruis' theme. So all of Ruis' songs don't have a lot of melody, besides the one I just showed you, that and one other. One that has a nearly identical composition to the last character, Legoshi. Now this track is Legoshi's Feelings. It's the only really melodic piece, besides many stories, that plays to represent Legoshi. It's expressed in horns, of course, and is accompanied by an acoustic guitar. It's one of my favorite pieces, and it sounds very subdued with almost a rage undertone, like the music could snap at any minute. But at the same time, hopeful. This happens because it uses 6 chords, again. This is made by taking a normal triad and lifting the 5th of the triad to a 6th. Why it does this is because the 6 chords don't have a strong pull towards major or minor, meaning it's very hard to hear whether the chord sounds happy or sad. In a typical triad, a major or minor would sound very different, but a C major 6 and a C minor 6 sound barely different, only with a tinge of more spice to the minor one. Anyway, it leaves the strong with a very uncertain key center, never really resolving to a tonic or a tonality. Still, this piece gets more interesting. This track is named Legoshi's Feelings and shares almost everything with another track named Ruis's Feelings. Not only just the chords and the melody, but also the key and tempo. Everything is the same except for two elements: the instrumentation and Ruis's sax solo. While Legoshi's Feelings is instrumentated in horns, Ruis's is instrumentated in woodwinds, besides the guitar and sax, which I'll get to in a second. All the notes are the same though, some are put further down in the range. You could say that's just the easiest range for the instruments to play, but I'd like to believe that it reflects the darkness of Ruis's past. Then the sax. It's a solo completely new and is not found anywhere in either Legoshi's Feelings or the rest of the soundtrack. Again, with the instrumentation, you can see as Ruis putting on a mask, but with underlying woodwinds, you know he can't hide from what he truly is, an herbivore, because woodwinds have represented herbivores, as they can be heard in Haru's theme as well as in Harlequin Rabbits and a few others pertaining to them. Despite these small differences, 95% of the musical materials is shared. Maybe it's trying to say that Ruis and Legoshi have a lot more in common than they're willing to admit. But tell me why the music feels so melancholic, like a vagueness of being unresolved. Well, if I had to guess, I'd stick it up to two things: the use of short, unresolved phrases, and the use of sixth chords, again. So take a look at this one very amazing and melancholic piece, Hope of This World. It starts with a piano playing an F major 7, G6, and C6 at 11. Then after a while, with the dissonance of these large 6 chords, it finally, kind of resolves to this uplifting melody. It feels like the fog lifts and finally a reprieve, but it doesn't fully end the phrase. It feels unresolved, yet still very hopeful, a sense of melancholy. So by setting up dissonance with the 6 chords before it, it feels really good to resolve to bright and strong chords. It goes through an F over C, a G over D, A minor over E, C over G, F over A, C over G, and a C6 sus. And it sounds a bit like a nightmare with all the slash chords, but it's basically a triad with the top 2 notes raised to add an extra ping of color and brightness. But in order to keep the feeling of melancholy, the phrase never fully resolves to a tonic, being F over C. Instead, it lands on a C6 sus, giving us a bittersweet ending to a beautiful piece. Then there's Beastars. I already talked about this track briefly and mentioned that it has 6 chords everywhere. But how does the 6th chord make it feel melancholic? Well, take a listen at these 2 blind examples. Which one sounds like it has more of a pull towards resolving? I hope you said the first one, because the first one is a 4, flat 4, 1 in the key of G. But the second one is the same chords, but they're in the 6th. It takes the edge off a chord by making resolutions feel less gratifying. So when you eventually do lift the metaphorical veil of 6 chords, it feels amazing, as in the last song. But there's one more track that has been on my mind since I watched Beastars. One track that I felt like was the final period to all of the tracks before it. Wolf and Rabbit. Wolf and Rabbit is the track that I would consider to be the culmination of all of Beastars' tracks. It only feels that way because the last song played in the season, or the last song played in the soundtrack, but it also manages to fit multiple leitmotifs, making callbacks to many points in the story, almost as an homage to all that's happened before that point. It opens with a solo piano playing a more subdued version of Juno's theme. Then it jumps straight into a reharmonization of Haru's theme, eventually introducing her theme in flute. After that, it moves into a callback to the first section of Beastars, in a more subdued, stalled way, pedaling the C in the bass. Then it fully breaks down into an absolutely beautiful string quartet, playing simple triads in 4-part harmony, playing the second section of Beastars, eventually introducing the theme in a celeste. It's an absolute masterpiece and ties a perfect bow on the first season of Beastars. I feel like Kosaki really poured his heart and soul into this piece. This anime has really outdone itself. It now not only sits as my favorite anime of all time, but also my favorite show. I really recommend each and every one of you to go watch it. You won't regret it. Now stay safe, wash your paws, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of this video. I'm super sorry about how long it took to come out. I had gotten a good part of the way through the music of Spirit, but then spontaneously decided to watch Beastars at midnight. I was hoping to not get too emotionally invested, but me being me, 7 hours later, had finished the first season and was bawling my eyes out. I knew I needed to make a video, so here we are now. I'm super excited for the next season in April of 2021, so I'll do my best to get a video out on that, but till that time comes, thanks for watching. I appreciate you all. Bye-bye. I'm not gonna start a flame war over the pronunciation of Ruis's name. In English, it would be Lewis, but there's no L in Japanese, so it's assigned to the R sound in katakana, and when translated back, it's Ruis, and I'm going to pronounce it as Ruis and spell it as Ruis, and no one can stop me.